Kaimere is a distant planet. It is defined by waves of life brought from Earth and set free to evolve independently in this new context. The indigenous life of the planet, swarms of microbes called magic by the people who live there, are what harvest Earth organisms and make copies on Kaimere. As the asteroid which concluded the Mesozoic never struck Kaimere, dinosaurs remain the dominant terrestrial megafauna.
Sauropods are often seen as the quintessential dinosaur. With long necks, long tails, small heads, and of course their tremendous size. Tetrapods have a conventional size of around 20 tons as a rough upper limit they can reach while on land. Sauropods not only broke this maximum, doubling it is considered normal, and their largest members may have multiplied it by 5. Not all sauropods had long tails, not all had long necks, and not all were large. Indeed, multiple species are estimated to be around the size of a small elephant as adults, and some island species weigh around a ton. Even with these exceptions, sauropods generally follow the conventional size and shape. A key to their tremendous size is that sauropods were extremely hollow. Not only were their skeletons and bodies packed with air sacs and other hollow cavities, their lungs had numerous chambers to facilitate a highly efficient unidirectional breathing. Unidirectional breathing through these many chambers of their lungs meant they were able to remove stale air and keep every breath fresh. Imperative for something so large. Between their multi-chambered lungs, abundant air sacs throughout neck and torso, and most of their bones being hollow, they are surprisingly lightweight despite having such tremendous bulk and muscular bodies. When feeding, sauropods don't need to move very often. Their long necks might look unwieldy, but between air sacs and hollow bones they are able to move around quite easily. This is further aided by ball and socket joints in their neck vertebrae, an adaptation that afforded extreme flexibility. Feeding is therefore quite easy. Simply stand and forage in a wide, flexible arc to clear all desired vegetation. As versatile bulk feeders, most vegetation is desired, so they can get by on almost anything in their wide range of feeding. Adulthood in sauropod comes in 2 forms. They become adults following sexual maturity, but after adulthood, most species continue to grow steadily until they reach their skeletal maturity, which is often when they are considered fully mature. They may still grow, but growth plateaus at this time and most species seems to stop growing entirely. It is extremely rare for sauropods to reach full maturity. Less than 1% of adults in a given population of Chimeran sauropods will be what we might consider full adults. These far more abundant smaller individuals will be more vulnerable to predators, but only a few mature females are needed to quickly recover their population, as a large fully mature female could lay dozens if not hundreds of eggs each year. No doubt this is how sauropods were able to rebound in the aftermath of numerous major extinction events, both on Earth and Kaimere. Also, growth in their peak can vary wildly depending on resource availability. This means that in the same species, you can have some adults that are 10 tons and some that are 40 depending on age and how much they were able to eat in their peak years of growth. In many species, you can expect to find a wide range of sizes, all considered adult animals. It is therefore quite difficult to give average estimated size for many sauropod species. With a few exceptions, the profiles you will see here represent adults that have slowed their growth but aren't fully grown. Think of it as a compromise, splitting the difference between average adults in a given population being smaller than the specimen shown, and the extreme rarity of fully adult sauropods. I will also include some maximum-sized individuals. These are by no means intended to represent even typical skeletal adults, rare though they are, just to show what the absolute maximum potential the assembly has documented for each animal. In many cases, only a handful of individuals achieve anything close to these dimensions in their entire global population, and many are reliant upon older great library documents to even approach an estimate, so is in no way meant to represent the typical adult. But perhaps more than any other animal, sauropods thrill us in their potential for tremendous size. Could be misleading, and for that I apologize, but I figure we're all here to see some extreme heavyweights, and it doesn't get more extreme than the sauropods. In the known world, only one clade of sauropods exists today, the keratoderms. Keratoderms are titanosaurs, the last and largest of the sauropods on Earth. Within Titanosauria, this relationship is better understood than many other clades. They are saltosaurs, likely being descended from small species like the nominative Saltosaurus itself, harvested during the Red Spring. In Kaimere, the dynastic extinction 15 million years ago wiped out all sauropods in Nikar. Like their distantly related Alamosaurus arriving in North America at the dusk of the Cretaceous, keratoderms migrated from Kairul to a realm without sauropods and had eruptive success in the absence of competition, quickly becoming the dominant herbivores and completely reshaping the world to their liking. This clade of 5 closely related modern species have substantial osteoderm armor. As adults, these bone deposits support display structures and store nutrients and minerals to help them through lean times. Females draw from these osteoderms as stores of calcium and other necessary ingredients to lay large clutches of eggs. Once mature, these animals are considered immune to predation as long as they are in good health thanks to their size, and the osteoderms afford minimal protection. Being so lightly built, they can often maneuver about to employ their great bulk with shocking efficiency. Armor in sauropods larger than around 15 tons, or indeed tail clubs or claws, are far behind size as their best defense or offense. Numerous predators or competitors have been crippled or killed with a simple shove. Indeed, in most older individuals, the osteoderms become so absorbed that they become subdermal. Old cows, which can each lay hundreds of eggs each year, and larger species if they are in good health, often deplete the bone core of their osteoderms, so these structures are hollow if they're even visible at all. In young, however, this armor serves a critical defense in their most vulnerable first years. With the exception of humans, keratoderms are the animal with the greatest impact on the ecology of the known world. Their movement shapes the growth of forests. Their steps break roots in compact soil, their claws churn it, and their browsing often fells trees in an effort to reach ever higher branches. Flatulence from their enormous fermenting gut contributes to Kaimere's warm climate. The carcass of elder titans can sustain millions of animals, and their bones provide the trees on which they thrive with critical nutrients. The plants they eat often make seeds specialized to pass through the gut of a titan, and are given a competitive head start in life with nutrient-rich dung piled around them. Numerous tree and fern species secrete allelopathic chemicals that make the soils acidic more favorable to them. Titan dung spreading these chemicals into the soil not only helps favor these plants that these sauropods prefer, it also hinders competing flora. This prevalence of allelopathic chemicals and more acidic soil has been suggested as why so many peoples living in or near the habitats of titans struggle to grow a lot of critical crop staples to the people of Kaimere. For all these reasons, the forests in which they reside are called Titan Gardens, and Titan Gardens are the most widespread and productive terrestrial habitat in the known world, outcompeting most other forests. Keratoderms are also a tremendous challenge to settlements. Ditches and walls around ring town gardens can be a basic deterrent, but more than any other animal, keratoderms shape where people can settle and thrive. With their enchanted metabolisms, Chimerans need more food than a human of the same size and lifestyle, and they are very reliant on magical crops which grow fast. These crops are very sensitive to soil and don't grow well near titans, so even if you're able to keep the enormous reptiles out, their impact on soil can still prove difficult. The keratoderms aren't specialized in these magical crops, they are a potent lure, and titans that learn of their nutrients will readily cross ditches and topple walls to get at these prizes. Smoke is really the only reliable defense against a determined titan. Yes, siege engines and even skilled archers are able to kill a keratoderm, but between the stench and scavengers it brings, a sauropod corpse near their walls is a reliable way to turn any settlement into a ghost town. Titanosaurs are quite wary of smoke. Their respiratory systems are very sensitive after all, and of course they are nervous at the prospect of being burned alive, so most settlements are able to reliably defend themselves with outposts or sections of wall, having a regular fire going, along with ditches and other deterrents. More information on the titanosaurs of the known world can be found in this episode. Though all sauropods in the known world belong to this clade of close relatives, their diversity is far greater in the realms beyond. In Arvel, 2 species in the genus Arvelotitan descend from titanosaurs that once lived in Nikar and crossed into Arvel when a land bridge formed tens of millions of years ago. They are distantly related to animals in the forests of Nikar, north of the equator, that crossed over from Kairul sometime in the past 12 million years. While the assembly is fairly certain that keratoderms are descended from a saltosaur of some kind, the ancestors of Arvelotitan and its fellow apsirinids is unknown. Despite the 2 clades having respectable range in Nikar and Arvel, they amount to a collective footnote compared to the sauropod diversity on the vast eastern continent of Kairul. Along with the 2 known world groups, both of which have their representatives in Kairul, there are 5 endemic clades of sauropod also residing in the eastern realm. In the known world, keratoderms have no dedicated predators. Even the Zentaur, largest land predator in the known world, only have a few individuals who specialize in taking down big titans. When they do, it's only when the sauropod is injured. There's simply not enough big adults in a given area to justify the investment of size and cooperation. Subadults are targeted, as 10 tons or under are a much more plausible kill for a Zentaur, but healthy adults are considered immune to predation. With so many sauropods, it should come as no surprise that this is not the case in Kairul. Not only will the Chakukabawe and other species of Uktan more readily take on the abundant sauropods, there are also predators like the Komukabawe, which are specialized titan killers, with broad, serrated teeth that are poor at catching and killing small game, but excellent for butchering large sauropods. They generally won't go after adults over 15 tons, but the sheer abundance of subadults combined with many smaller species make this lifestyle well worth the investment. Unlike the Megaraptorans, that learn and individually specialize at taking on keratoderms, the anatomy of the Komukabawe is reflective of this species as a whole locking in on this target, a testament to the abundance and diversity of sauropods in Kairul. Bokodu, the giant entelodont, are another predator that sometimes specialize in sauropods. Large boars are, like the Komukabawe, not terribly capable killers of smaller game. Their powerful jaws are, however, quite useful weapons against the lightweight skeleton of a titanosaur. Even so, they usually don't attack sauropods greater than their own mass. A sauropod is more nimble at parity given their much lighter frame, and they are still extremely muscular. There are, of course, plenty of subadult titans in a given population, indeed far more abundant than the larger adults, and the Bakodu are well documented to hunt numerous subtropical and temperate species. Kairul has its share of keratoderms in the family Keratodermidae. Indeed, this is where the lineage of sauropods evolved. However, they didn't get large until they left Kairul and reached the continent with minimal competition in their league. In Kairul, only the motoan is especially large, though this prairie wanderer is among Kaimere's largest sauropods, with the biggest males estimated to reach 20 meters high and weigh over 100 tons in their seasonal peak, though most bulls are closer to 40 and 60. The motoan reaches this great size in northern Nikar, then return to Kairul, where they are now far larger than their ancestors and living eastern cousins. It is the largest animal in the known world, certainly the biggest in terms of linear dimensions, though given the extremely light build of keratoderms, even amongst other sauropods, they still weigh less than the biggest cachalot whales, and far less than the largest blue whales of Earth, which are still bigger than anything ever documented in Kaimere's long history of enormous animals. The motoan, like other keratoderms, keeps its neck elevated at rest. Indeed, when it is walking, the neck will often recurve back so much of its length is perpendicular to the ground. It is believed this is more efficient as it does not need to spend energy holding it out like other sauropods do. It is also thought that this posture may be easier on the heart than if it were held out. While feeding, it will readily extend its neck out, depending on where its feeding opportunities are. They have been observed grazing, though it seems to dislike holding their neck out for extended periods of time, and much prefer to feed on higher branches. This high posture, coupled with long legs, extreme pneumaticity even for a sauropod, and osteoderms providing nutrient supplements, all make for an extremely efficient traveler, and it is likely how keratoderms were the first sauropod to make the voyage into Nikar after the native sauropods perished. Motoan are a highly migratory species. Though they are high browsers as adults, when young they are almost entirely reliant on horsetails for their initial diet. These are found in northern Nikar and the northwood of Kairul. They will occasionally supplement with ferns, but horsetails are their primary intake for their first few years. This is typical of sauropods in Kaimere. Horsetails are highly nutritious, though because of their highly abrasive silica in their cell walls, many animals avoid them as they can be very erosive to teeth. As sauropods don't chew and also readily shed and replace teeth, this abrasive diet isn't a problem. As adults, bending over to eat horsetails isn't ideal, but at their great height, they often enjoy exclusive access to other plants in the form of high browse. Though often associated with the Hausa Prairie, motoan almost never eat grass. When they do, it's only as a supplement during migration. Mostly they are after tree stands along a few waterways. With their great size and long stride, nothing is as efficient at travel as these colossal reptiles. This animal has a reputation as being a giant among giants with almost supernatural origins in the known world. Chimerans have never documented their young, leading to an assumption of them being gods among the other keratoderms. The truth is that their young are born in the forests of northern Nikar, and only the occasional wandering adult enters the known world seeking easy forage with no competition for a few months before walking back north to mate. Motoan nesting and mating is not as well studied as other keratoderms, but they seem to follow the conventions of the clade. The nests themselves are simple, just holes dug in the soil with dung and soil scattered atop to mask the scent and insulate. Ideal nest sites are rare and highly competitive. Herds of females will congregate and have strict hierarchy in nest placement. Dominant females in the center, with descending status further out. Laying above their status will prompt subordinate cows to be attacked and in rare cases even killed. Males are not as routinely violent. Most of their confrontations are just for show. On the rare instances where keratoderm bulls do come to blows, these fights are often to the death. A bull will claim a nest site and call out, drawing in both cow herds and competing males. The resonant songs that a bull sings directly reflect their size and health through sheer volume. Smaller males avoid these calls. If he hears a larger bull on the way, the original claimant will often depart. If the bulls are the same size, or smaller is in greater health, they may come to blows. Despite their obscene size, motoan are extremely lightly built and able to move with uncanny deftness and agility. Indeed, some have speculated keratoderms are only as slow as they are because of the sheer length and reaction time of their nerves, more than mass and scale. Males not only fight by cudgeling each other with spiked forearms and long thumb spurs, they also bite at the thick, elastic neck hide. Once they topple an opponent, they mount to rend with foot claws. Motoan foot claws are a lot smaller than those of Cuporo titan, a consequence of their size and desert prairie specializations, but they can still deal lethal injury. Indeed, these fights often end in one male being killed. Sometimes the victor gets to mate, but still perishes from his injuries. The stress of mating with many cows after having to fast and journey to the nest site can also mean even if a male is unchallenged, he may perish at the end of the season. A few titan corpses near the nest is actually to the benefit of the young. This draws in big scavengers that make a lot of nest raiders wary, or they will just pick over a carcass rather than seek out eggs, given olfactory cover by the corpse, not to mention the dung. By the time the eggs hatch, the corpse has also fertilized the ground, and this new garden is often their first meal. Being enormous is a tremendous incentive for males, as it allows them to not only more efficiently travel and claim nest sites, they can pack in greater fat reserves, and are of course much better at winning fights. The largest males are rare, but they are by far the most prolific, making up a tiny fraction of the male population, but a vast majority of the fathers. Subordinates of both sexes can have their offspring far from these congregations, but the nesting colonies are where most motoan come from. Progon Heros is much more representative of keratoderms in Kairul and how they likely lived back during the Tyrant Dynasty. Indeed, the ancestral keratoderm seems basically indistinguishable. At 8 tons in large males, this is a sauropod of humble dimensions. Their armor is, at this size, an important defense against the megaraptorans and sauropod slayers like the Komu Kabawe. Progon Heroes lives primarily in the equatorial Titan Gardens, though there are a few related species in northern woodlands. They are still quite comfortable as high browsers, though because of their smaller size, they also much more comfortably low browse on horsetails like young of the known world keratoderms. Their light build makes them quite nimble for an animal of 3 to 7 tons, and like young of their giant cousins, they can trot and turn with unnerving speed and agility. They can't technically run, but when alternating strides they can reach in excess of 15 miles per hour. Compared to the known world, keratoderms are a lot more genetically diverse in Kairul, where this clade originated. Steracopygus is one such animal. These keratoderms lack the tail clubs or studs of Progonheros and most known world titans. While cows have moderate spikes along their hips, the dorsal osteoderms of males form a pair of tall rows which can be over a meter long in the largest specimens. These spines are laterally compressed and quite sharp along the edges. In cows, the osteoderms are shorter and wider. Much like known world keratoderms, their bone cores are important sources of minerals and egg-laying to a degree that they are often entirely hollow, save a thin layer of bone connected to the keratin in older females. Titanosaurs appear to have a reduction, if not outright loss, of toes in their front feet. There is a debate as to if this may be an issue of tiny digits not being preserved alongside larger bones. Some yet preserve carpals and others have phalanges, so it may be that only a few clades had this reduction, and maybe they didn't outright lose all their fingers. Titanosaurs of Kaimere demonstrate a range of reduction by clade. One group in Kairul, for example, retains fairly noticeable phalanges. The keratoderms of the known world have lost both phalanges and carpals, with only a metacarpal hand connecting to the ground. The spike on their forefoot is a thumb cloth used as a spur to the first metacarpal. This fusion occurs in males upon maturity. And the structures that resemble other finger claws are osteoderms and scales along the metacarpals. Their hind feet, conversely, have quite robust and mobile claws used for digging and in combat. Unlike the keratoderms, the Arvelotitans belong to a clade thought to originate in Nikar prior to the dynastic extinction, though there's so much of their interchange between Nikar and Kairul that it's difficult to say. This clade, Apsirinidae, are so named for their tall nasal arches, which in some species converges upon the profile of more basal macronarians like Camarasaurus. Indeed, Apsirinus itself has species in both Nikar and Kairul named for this trait. They have a general similarity in outward appearance to Camarasaurus. These are generalist feeders happy to browse or graze on a wide range of local flora. This versatility is perhaps what made them the most widespread titanosaur clade, ranging from western Arvel, up through northern Nikar, along northern Kairul, and down into the western peninsula. There's little special to be said about them. They don't have much in the way of notable features, but in this generic body plan and adaptability and habitat and diet, they are by far the greatest geographic success of any titanosaur clade. It is likely that this versatility is how the Apsirinids survived the dynastic extinction while other Nikari clades went extinct. However, being generalist also means they appear often outcompeted by other specialized clades. They have the widest range of any sauropod group, but nowhere in their range do they enjoy dominion over other sauropods. Being so generalist and basal means that this clade has given the assembly far more insight into prehistoric titans than many other modern clades. Apsirinids, after all, originated in the early Cretaceous and have changed very little. The Arvelotitans have been separated from their Nikari kin for over 100 million years, yet are still confidently placed within the same family. Their largest species is Apsirinus caudocamelus, the collared humptail. Endemic to Kairul's northern forest, they can feed on a wide range of conifers, deciduous leaves, ferns, and horsetails. A generalist diet serves them well, and they are able to make do on whatever is abundant at the time. They can feed alongside the high-browsing motoan or the low-browsing pachycephalosaurs and thescelosaurs with which they share this habitat, alongside other species of Kairul endemic titanosaur clades. Though many titans store fat at the base of their tail to help during lean times, they have been suggested to play an important role in signaling health to potential mates. Only the collared humptail has 2 of these humps. The reason for this deviation from the norm is unknown. The colored humptail usually range between 30 and 40 tons as adults, but some enormous specimens are documented and put this animal among numerous contenders for Kaimere's largest sauropod. There are 5 endemic clades, or those found only in Kairul. 3 families of Velocititan, the allopods of a western peninsula, and the cryptosaurs of the Far East. Most famous and abundant are the Velocititans, which include 3 families that all appear to have diverged shortly before the dynastic extinction, then erupted to become the most diverse and successful of modern clades. Despite a name that might imply they are fast, it instead is in reference to their rapid growth. Titanosaurs already were among the fastest growing of all sauropod clades. Apsirhinus takes around 30 years to reach their 10 to 15 ton sexual maturity. The caraterderms grow between 400 kilos and a ton each year depending on food abundance and their peak in growth. Velocititans of the genus Hoplotitan can grow as much as 2 tons a year during their peak growth years under optimal conditions. As this genus is in its modern times endemic to the equatorial to subtropical jungles central to the western peninsula, there's really no seasonal changes. They enjoy a surplus of their preferred food year-round, no doubt the source of their tremendous growth. They do migrate inland to more arid regions to nest, as the storms and floods which enable their accelerated growth and vegetative abundance are not conducive to reliable nesting, but aside from that, they spend their lives in these lush jungles. Most importantly, immature individuals do not migrate. Once they reach the dense underbrush, they begin a life of non-stop eating. Velocititans don't have very prominent osteoderms or thumb spurs of keratoderms. Their only osteoderms are a midline pair along the back and some along the side, with one clade having them on limb extremities. In the most abundant clade, these are minimal, though there are 2 that have deep roots that are crucial in nesting. Hoplotitan is the most famous and best-known genus of the Hoplotitanidae. They are named for the phalanx formation these animals form when predators are near. Mature males tend to live on their own, are so large that they have no need for this social defense if in good health. But not only are females smaller, they often live in mixed herds with subadults, which can be more vulnerable. Bachelor herds also form ranks, though not as complex. Living in forests can make it hard to assemble, but once they do, even their specialized predators are often wary. The Hercules titan is among the largest of this clade and also one of the most abundant species. Their growth does slow after maturity, but males will sometimes still put on half a ton each year. Cows rarely exceed 20 tons, but bulls will keep going as long as there is sufficient food. Their biggest specimens are estimated to approach 100 tons, making them among Kaimere's largest titans. Being so large in the oppressive tropics, Hoplotitan have evolved numerous means of shedding heat, most notably in their skin. Without worrying about the armor of their keratoderm cousins, Hoplotitans are covered in clusters of spiked scales around naked skin. This not only increases their surface area, it's extremely easy to cool off by wallowing. A flap of soft tissue on their forearms and hindquarters also helps to shed heat. They also have very thin skin on the roof of their mouths, helping to cool blood near the brain by simply breathing. Their skin in general is quite thin. This may leave them vulnerable to the weapons of their predators, but the extreme heat of the equator means it's worth a trade, especially since they live in a habitat that will always give them enough food. Hoplotitan is not the only genus in this family, and some don't nearly approach their size. Legionarius populus is another common species in these tropical gardens that grow rapidly. However, their growth slows at around 8 to 10 tons. Both sexes are around this size, though males average slightly larger. They live in mixed-sex herds. Being smaller means they are better able to maneuver into their phalanx formation, and that's where this genus truly shines. They are still large enough to reliably fend off most threats as adults, but with the aid of a herd, even a determined pair of chakukabawe or pack of giant raptors can be turned away. All titanosaurs are capable of standing on their hind legs. If they could not, males would be incapable of mating. In some taxa, like the back-heavy Legionarius, especially when young or among smaller species, this bipedal posture can comfortably and efficiently be maintained for extended periods of time, sometimes up to an hour in smaller individuals. This helps greatly expand their browsing range. It is also the posture they take when forming rank if space permits. A species of Legionarius is found on an island far into the interior ocean of Kairul. This population is quite closely related to mainland populous species, and it is thought that they may be carried out to this island within the past million years or so. Like many island fauna, they have shrunk to a fraction of their mainland size to demand fewer resources, and because there is no terrestrial predator large enough to threaten them, older than past a few weeks old. Adults are usually around a ton. It was initially suggested that they may have swum out to this island as adults. Titanosaurs are so hollow and buoyant that they can remain afloat without any effort. However, this island is over 1,000 miles from the mainland and not far from one of the main currents. Another proposal has been made in light of this. Perhaps a number of hatchlings were on a raft of vegetation that floated from the mainland to this paradise. Whatever their origin, an estimated population of 6,000 of these Lilliputian titans are the only terrestrial animal larger than a possum in this secluded Eden. Another small hoplotitan is Caudipeltis, so named for their abundant osteoderms concentrated at the base of the tail. Though not as tiny as Legionarius lilliputensis, they are still small for titans, averaging around 3 tons. They grow fast, reaching maturity in 3 years, unprecedented for a sauropod. With laterally compressed bodies compared to the otherwise wide build for titans, they are able to slink through dense vegetation of these verdant jungles, thereby avoiding detection from most predators large enough to pose a threat. They live in herds and will assemble in formations if they are able, but tend to live in dense brush. It is often too late to form up when an abelosaurid or some other threat launches an attack. They will often be found accompanying herds of other species of titanosaur, seeking larger species perhaps for protection, especially found with Legionarius. Like all hoplotitans, Caudipeltis retains phalanges which flare out, helping them keep their footing in the soft soil of their rainforest homes. Larger hoplotitan must keep their hands compact and tight for load-bearing, but an advantage of this smaller size is that Caudipeltis is able to benefit from longer fingers and therefore more confident steps in wet soil. Being so laterally compressed, they tend to walk with all feet forming a straight line trackway. However, like many other titans, especially their velocititans, they are able to switch to a wider stance as the terrain demands. When traversing especially muddy ground, for example, they can switch to a wider stance to keep stable. Keratoderms can also adjust their stance like this, but they are much less sure-footed on wet terrain thanks to their compact, sturdy feet, and are far less comfortable in uneven terrain than the likes of Caudipeltis. In the known world, Titan gardens are generally considered open habitat. They are ample game trails of compact soil that the sauropods regularly pass through, which indeed serve as useful roads for people that utilize these gardens, But even then, the thicket is often fairly clear, in part because the forests are often more on the arid side. Here in Kairul's lush jungles that are constantly watered, there is far quicker floral turnover and recovery as titanosaurs pass through. There are plenty of conifers so enormous that even titanosaurs cannot topple them, same as the great cedars of the known world, but a lot of the plants are shorter and more dense, meaning these jungles aren't open woodland. There are still reliable game trails, but the density of the vegetation means often the titanosaurs just stick to the paths and feast along the thicket on either side as they walk. The assembly found these trails so well trodden and compacted that some were compared to paved roads, and the travel was surprisingly effortless compared to having to blaze trails in other expeditions. In the known world, perhaps the greatest impact of titans, rivaling their chemical influence on the soil and devastating foraging, is sound. With enormous lungs and many air sacs, the volume and resonance of their mere breathing can be unsettling, and when they bellow and sing, it can be deafening. A majority of the noises adults make are infrasonic or too deep for humans to hear, but ask any Chimeran who lives near titans, and they will attest that these calls are felt with great clarity. Sleep can be hard to achieve, and often there are many names for numerous Chimeran languages of the sickness that can curdle the innards with too much exposure to Titan song. Nausea, madness, miscarriage, and even death can be attributed to Titan song. The mating season is especially unsettling, and there are many legends and myths about the curses that Titan song can put into the air. All this is amplified in Kairul, especially the Titan Gardens of the Equator, where there is the greatest diversity of Titan species, means that they differentiate their songs in an attempt to outdo one another and make their songs stand out. More small species means more songs are in our hearing range, but there's still plenty of infrasound. Day and night, the Titan's songs reverberate through the trees, water, and bodies of any living things nearby. Many assembly researchers describe this discordant and resonant soundscape as their greatest challenge to fieldwork. The family Podagrasauridae, or Goutfoot drakes, are a family of velocititans that have the widest Kairulan distribution of any Kairulan sauropod group. Podagrasaurus is a common titan in the southern hemisphere of the western peninsula, thriving in the Fenrir prairies as the most common sauropod. Podagrasaurus, and indeed its clade as a whole, are so named for their heavily scaled and caruncled feet. The adaptive benefits of this are unknown, though they are used when bulls compete for mating rights and cows battle over prime nesting grounds. It is likely that this is the drive. Velocititans don't have a thumb claw of other clades, so these blunt weapons may be a less lethal implement for a similar aim. Podagrasaurus are hunted not only by the Bikodu and Chakukabawe, but by the intelligent riders of these prairies. They have also on occasion been raised and even tame enough to ride. They are skittish and don't take well to combat, but their mere presence with a fortress on their back is enough to inspire terrifying legends. Unlike the hoplititans of the tropics, Podagrasaurus does not enjoy abundant year-round vegetation. On the Fenrir prairies, where they are most abundant, these are mixed feeders, packing in a range of tree stands and prairie grass. They readily grow where food is abundant, and slow when it is not. When they reach between 10 and 15 years old, they mature and slow growth. However large they are once this growth slows, is how big they will get. This means there's a surprising disparity in their size, and averages are quite difficult to estimate, even for a sauropod. Food intake during these critical years is far greater a factor than sex, so even the conventional dimorphism of titanosaurs is difficult to assert with this species. Some are around 10 tons, others can reach 50. This sort of plasticity is most extreme in the next contender for Kaimere's largest sauropod, the grazing velocititans of the genus Acridodon. Their name means locust teeth for their prolific grazing. Though many sauropods incorporate some grass into their diet, even the gymno-specialist caraterderms, the Acridodonts are the only specialized grazers. The clade is found both north and south, though Acridodon latonathus is most restricted to northern Kairul. In southern Kairul, there are multiple similar grazes, though their designation as different species, or perhaps just a subspecies of Acridodon latonathus, depends on which researcher you ask. The northern Acridodon are specialized in the abundant housey grass, though as prairie grass is more diverse in Kairul than the known world, which has taken over in an unchecked invasive species, the Acridodonts will readily graze on other flora. While most Chimeran sauropods have their necks somewhere between 45 and 90 degrees at rest, Acridodon hold their necks parallel to the ground with only a slight upward curve. A massive shoulder hump anchors muscles and tendons to make this less expensive. Their body is technically angled downward, but this hump makes their torso look level. With a wide snout at the end of a long neck, they are able to effortlessly mow across the prairie. Grass may not be highly nutritious, and they don't have the ample fermenting benefits of horsetails and some conifers bestow, but they are able to make ends meet through sheer quantity of bulk feeding. Velocititans all have their teeth concentrated in dense rows at the front of their mouths. They shed their teeth every few weeks, usually losing the whole row at once. All sauropods have extreme enamel quantity to keep their teeth hard, but velocititans have the highest enamel percentage of any vertebrate tooth, sometimes they are able to achieve thanks to small teeth on small jaws. The new teeth form a sharp cutting edge on the front of both jaws. In Acridodon, this replacement is key to their consumption of grass. Not only is grass an abrasive plant, with ample silica content much like horsetails, anything short of precise clipping could result in lots of soil in their guts, given the sheer quantity they must consume. In addition to avoiding the consumption of soil, this method also means they don't harm the roots, so can come back a week or two later for a fresh, full meal. Velocititans, specifically Acridodonts, have been suggested to descend from Rabachisaurids in recent comparisons to fossils, both in the known world and the fossil record of Earth, due to similar dentition of Nigersaurus. However, they are deeply nested within titanosaurs, and this dentition is instead a case of convergent evolution. The great housey prairie of northern Kairul is an unpredictable landscape. It can go decades without ample rain. In these years, conditions are such that most Acridodon only reach the mass of around 10 to 15 tons before they stop growing. Housey grass can be one of the only plants seen for miles on end, and despite being arid specialists, even this hardy plant only grows so much under desert conditions. However, sometimes the prairie is far more verdant. Numerous wind currents have the potential to bring storms deep inland, and there are years when multiple storms occur each year. If this happens for a decade or even a century during critical growth, Acridodon can capitalize on this bounty with an eruption of size. When it rains heavily for so long, countless lakes and rivers form, allowing other plants to grow, most critically the horsetails, which are essentially a sauropod superfood. Though it was long assumed there was a lesser and greater species of housey Acridodon, it is now known that this is all the same animal, just that the formative years will dictate if the adults grow and reach skeletal maturity at 10 tons or 100. Those of smaller adults can be slain by Ukten, Bokodu, and other large predators. The giant Acridodon is predator immune by 20 tons, and this mass can be multiplied by more than 5 in their largest specimens. These giants need less food once they grow, often doing just fine on housey grass itself, and they can live for multiple centuries, sending hundreds of eggs onto the prairie every year. There are rarely an abundance of these biggest sauropods, but they alone are often able to keep their species sustained through the drought. Acridodon, like others in their grazing clade, have a particularly robust gizzard which cycles with their stomach. It seems grass doesn't require an abrasive digestion as horsetails favored by other titans, but it does demand ample labor, and having the gizzard process food back and forth with the stomach helps make the most of this far less nutritious fare than most other sauropods intake. Hindgut fermentation of more nutritious food is by any metric a far superior method, hence why most other sauropods retain this diet, despite grass being more common in Kaimere than it was in the Cretaceous, but specializing in food other titans tend to avoid has freed this lineage of a lot of competition. Another noteworthy aspect of the Acridodon is their parental care. Most titans lay their eggs in communal nests. Keratoderm cows remain in the area until hatching, then leave the young in the care of juveniles from previous years. They don't closely protect their young, though adult keratoderms are violent near the nest or the scent of young, and are known to attack potential nest raiders when possible. It is common for young keratoderms to live in mixed-aged groups for protection. A 5-year-old, 3-ton sauropod might not be able to realistically fight off a marten threatening a hatchling, but they can protect the yearlings from wolves and raptors, which in turn can fight off the small threat to the littlest ones. Living in mixed-age groups like this means that each year of young can defend their younger companions and are themselves defended all the way up to adults large enough to be effectively immune to predator pressures. As the older juveniles don't get much benefit of confidence of a familial relationship, this protective instinct appears to simply be present to help ensure more of the species will survive. Some titans don't even do this much. Acridodon don't have to migrate to new nesting areas. They live in exactly the sort of dry conditions ideal for sauropod nests. Even in years of heavy rains, adults can just move a bit further inland to graze and nest. This means they are able to reliably defend the nest sites, if only passively so, given that adults are often having a hard time deterring nest raiders at their size. Living in mixed herds with subadults and juveniles not only protects these younger generations, similar to keratoderms, it also affords protection for their own young directly. They don't feed their nestlings, but their dung provides ample fertilizer for more nutritious horsetails to grow near the nest, even in the grassy prairie, so their presence affords great advantage all the same. As the young get older, the adults can more reliably defend them, and some herds are comprised of a century or two of young around a single ancient female. Because of this, the species can endure regular population bottlenecks and rapidly recover to enormous numbers when the region is more favorable. Though most associated with prairies and their dietary specialization does demand they stay near abundant grass, they are not entirely restricted here. It is not uncommon for this animal to range into forests, adding some mixed forage to their diet now and then, though they often stick near grass. They also pass through wetlands from time to time, as salt marshes in particular offer a staggering abundance of grasses they can gorge on. It is here that they encounter another acridodont. Despite their depiction in early paleoart, sauropods as a general rule are not fond of wetlands, instead preferring solid ground. Many are so buoyant from their hollow bones and air sacs that they can't even submerge their neck enough to grasp wetland vegetation. Juveniles are an exception, often starting off in marshes, but once they reach a ton or so, their load-bearing adaptations make wetlands difficult to traverse. Keratoderms of the known world takes this to an extreme, rarely venturing even near wet soil and getting most of the water they need from the plants they consume. An exception to this rule is a close relative of Ecritodon, Sauropotamus. Alongside their salt marsh abundance, these herbivores thrive in the wetland habitats of the equatorial jungles. Their bones are unusually dense for a sauropod, and their air sacs throughout their body are minimal to better allow them to submerge. It has been suggested that this density and loss of air sacs has put a cap on their size, as they have space and food to grow larger. They have a similar preference for grass as their giant cousins, though cows especially are more mixed feeders. Despite spending much of their lives in the water, cows must not only find land to nest, the soil must be dry, so they often have to travel far inland after mating. The abelosaurids, crocodiles, ceratopsians, and pachycephalosaurids in their habitat often and much more reliably claim and defend the few elevated nest sites they might otherwise try to utilize within the wetlands themselves. Males are able to get larger as a consequence of not needing to go on land, and indeed at 12 tons to the 5 tons of the adult cows, they seem to avoid land altogether. Males thrive in the salt marshes, while cows often have to live further inland under more cover. They are not particularly good swimmers despite this habitat preference. Though quite successful, Sauropotamus certainly face their share of challenges, occupying this unconventional niche. Sauropotamus are the most attentive parents of any sauropod. Because females must travel far inland to nest on dry soil, they often remain by the nest for the 4 months of incubation. This is a demanding stretch of fasting, but they have a very high number of eggs in their hatch compared to most other sauropods. They will then take their young back to wetter habitats and defend them closely for their first year or two. Because of the investment and its demands, they often take a year or two off between nestings. Sauropods appear to have a poor tolerance of cold. On Earth, they are not found north of 50 degrees and south of 65. During the Mesozoic, this means they were restricted to temperate and warmer latitudes and didn't seem capable of enduring freezing temperatures. Their offspring were a likely source of this intolerance. Adults were probably large enough to stay warm given their endothermic metabolisms, though their respiration and high surface-to-volume ratio may have been a weakness. Even if the adults could survive, juveniles and eggs without insulation would have been vulnerable, especially as their nests were exposed. The same is true of sauropods in Kairul. The continent is largely within warmer latitudes, and even the temperate zones are well within their inhabitable temperatures. Even so, the southern reaches of the western peninsula are not teeming with sauropods. Indeed, there are only 3 species, 2 in the forest and 1 in the mountains. One of them is a podagrosaur, or goutfoot drake. The others are not velocititans. Instead, these are the allopods, or Strangefoot titans, a distinct clade that appears to have survived the dynastic extinction here in the south and never managed to expand much beyond their initial surviving range. The mountain sauropod, Aroctoc, is the strangest of the lot. Many sauropods have scales on the bottom of their feet. This species takes this to an extreme, with soft, rubbery keratin growing between the scales to afford tremendous traction alongside the gripping scales. These versatile stance of sauropods is also exaggerated in these titans, able to walk with narrow steps in a single line or almost 2 meters apart, depending on the demands of the terrain. This allows them to climb with allegedly supernatural prowess in search of food. They are averaging between 3 and 4 tons among Kaimere's smallest mainland sauropods. While they can endure cold temperatures up in the highlands, they must still nest in warmer climates. Thankfully, the mountains in which they reside are generally low and with abundant valleys throughout that are both warm and secluded from many lowland threats. Geothermal vents are especially popular as nesting sites, and they are a reliable defense against all but the most determined nest raiders. Sauropods have spread across Kairul even to the southern hemisphere of the eastern peninsula, where very few animals have successfully passed over the Deadlands. As most sauropods in the reliquary and southwood are of a distinct clade from the rest of the continent, it is believed they reached this area prior to the dynastic extinction and repopulated this peninsula prior to the much more recent arrival of a single species of velocititan that has since become quite successful, dominating the native sauropods. The megaraptorans here are small. At 2 to 3 tons, the eastern species of Uktan is no monarch. They are instead the vassals to the kings in these woods. The great Saraden. Saradens is the last genus of carcharodontosaur in Kaimere, with 3 species all endemic to this eastern peninsula. Despite resembling the cardinal carcharodontosaurines that once ruled Kairul, it is believed they instead descend from more basal carcharodontosaurids like Congavenator, or perhaps even outside the proper group, perhaps deriving from Neovenatorids. Whatever their strict classification, the largest species have converged quite dramatically on the body plan of the old kings of Kaimere, with short arms, a narrow body with staggeringly muscular back, and a massive head filled with flat serrated teeth. True to the mantle of the cardinals and the likes of Giganotosaurus, these predators thrive on the flesh of titanosaurs. Of course, adult titans larger than 20 tons are off the menu, but these Methuselahs are rare, and most great Saradens' prey are titans matching their own 12 tons or less. Of the native cryptosaurs, the most common is the nominative Cryptosaurus laparabellos, or spurflank titan. This is a species of middling size, between 20 and 30 tons on average, though enormous specimens are attested in the southern forests across this isolated peninsula. Like the apsirhinids, they are a generalist animal, being mixed feeders, content with a wide range of food, both low and high. Spurflank titans get their name for the large scales on their bodies, especially the lower half of the torso. Though the spikes over their hips are osteoderms and larger in females, most of their spikes are feature scales with no bone cores. They tend to live in small herds of mixed age and sex. They don't have a strict mating season, and both sexes are not as violent with each other as many titans are. Many males in the herd will mate with females when she is receptive, and she will lay multiple nests with a few eggs so they don't compete much for nest space. Study has been minimal, but it does appear this clade are usually tolerant of each other. The same cannot be said of Jagannath, the podagrosaur that recently arrived from the west. They are, as is typical of the family, quite violent with one another. Females for nest space, and males for mating rights. Much more rapid growth, coupled with their highly derived feeding apparatus, means this species has quite successfully muscled their way into the southern reliquary and southwood, being more abundant than all native species combined. They are remarkable in having the longest neck of any animal in Kaimere, longest proportionally of any Chimeran sauropod. The Catanuk, an abyssal elasmosaur, and the motoan both provide competition in absolute length, but a giant sighted from a research outpost was said to approach the size of the largest motoan with a neck far longer. This specimen was never sighted again and certainly not verified, but if true, it would indeed have the longest neck of any known Chimeran animal. For all their great abundance in the subtropical and temperate zones, neither type of sauropod in the eastern peninsula has had much success in the equatorial reliquary. This is likely a consequence of neither doing well in wet terrain, instead preferring the dry and more open forest to the south. Because of this, the reliquary supports many strange fauna that gives this jungle its name, living in much denser canopies than habitats dominated by sauropods. All sauropods in the known world, its continents, and Kairul are titanosaurs. The Jurassic Islands to the east of Kairul have their own clade of sauropods with disputed ancestry, but aside from that, titanosaurs are the only sauropods of Kaimere. However, a close relative of the sauropods has made a home for themselves in numerous corners of the planet. Most famous of these are the parasauropods of Kaishel, the southern continent, which we will meet in our next episode. Cheers to Darius for sponsoring this episode. This one has been sponsored for quite a while, but there was more development I had to do in Kairul before it was ready, and I'm thankful to Darius for his patience. My thanks also goes out to my art budget team who helped contribute funds, which allowed me to bulk up the research, species roster, and sketches for this episode. My great thanks to Acidic Glavinus 1, Christian, Garrick, Glarn, Levi, Luna, Sam, and Siren Lord. Thanks to your collective support, I was able to assemble this monster of an episode. Thanks again to Darius, to my Patreon patrons for your support, and thank you for watching. Cheers, folks!